That won't be any fun. Okay, thank you all so much for dropping everything to join this emergency Universal Basic Income or UBI meeting. We've got this amazing opportunity in front of us, and it's just fantastic that you guys could drop everything to join us. We selected you to be a broad base of understanding about a little bit about UBI, a lot about independent film, and to sort of see how Universal Basic Income might best fit our field. But I'm not sure that you all know each other, so let's do a quick round of introductions. I'll start with myself, and then I'll throw the ball to someone, and we'll go around. Also, just saying whether you consider yourself already like a black belt at UBI, whether you're something like a red blue belt, or maybe you're just a white belt newbie. Oh, who's got a dog in the house? Love a dog in the house. It's not. John. The dog is also welcome to this emergency meeting. So I'm Jess Search. I'm one of the founders of Doc Society. Super interested in UBI. Been following it for a few years, but I'm not an expert. I probably maybe call myself a brown belt in the subject. And I'm going to pass to Jad.
Hello, I'm Jad Abi Khalil. I'm a founder member of Beirut DC, and actually I am the executive director. And I'm a big fan of UBI. Actually, we are developing a model for the Arab region. We are searching for a model, and we will talk about it later.
So maybe you're like a blue belt.
Yes.
You pass to somebody else.
John.
Hi, everyone. I'm John Goff. I'm a filmmaker and program officer at the Ford Foundation, working with the Just Films portfolio. And I have limited experience with UBI, other than the fact that as a young working artist, I received the free New York City healthcare when I first started working production, and that was a scary experience. Firsthand knowledge of certainly the need for it. And I'll pass it over to Khushboo.
Hi everyone. I am a filmmaker from India, and I have produced a few documentaries, but I'm also right now, I have founded this organization called India Docs, which is meant to give financial and resource support to documentary filmmakers in India, as no such thing exists currently. And my experience with UBI, I would say I'm an appreciator or a connoisseur. I don't know what belt that makes me, Jess, but I have, as I was saying that actually on my dating profile, if I was to overshare a little bit, I have written that the way to my heart is food, film, and universal basic income. So at least 2 out of those 3 things merit my presence as well. But yeah, so my experience with UBI actually, like, beyond a certain amount of like generosity through grant giving organizations, and how that has helped me, which I hope to be able to get into in the discussion. I don't have first-hand experience. Sarath, sorry.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarath Davala, and I'm a sociologist. And my first brush with UBI was when I was asked to lead a pilot project in Madhya Pradesh in India, the first pilot in India. This was between 2010 and 2014. So that was the time when I was shocked to hear that something you give unconditionally. I said, that's not our grammar of welfare. Anyway, ever since I've been an advocate, and it's been a completely transformative experience for me, actually seeing the effects in the villages we did. Now I am leading along with another professor, I'm leading another basic income pilot in Hyderabad with waste collectors. Right now, I'm in Nepal designing another pilot in Nepal, and we are discussing with the government to support us, but essentially UNDP is really behind us. Oh, I'm really excited. Last 12 years, I think that's the only thing I've been doing, basic income. I'm really happy to be here.
You are definitely our black belt. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So I think you all know why we're here, but basically I got rung up by someone I met on a yoga holiday called Babs. And Babs is working for this guy, you probably heard of him, Pepe Shores, you know, the guy that just divorced the CEO of the Silicon Valley, like, darling Bookface. Anyway, now he's got his husband's money. Guess it turns out the two things he's the most interested in are independent documentary and universal basic income. I mean, like, you know, who can believe it? Anyway, she just called me up. Amazing. Basically, he's got his new foundation, which is called the Two Fingers Fund. And they've got their first board meeting literally in 2 days' time. And they want to put forward a massive UBI independent filmmaker, you know, a proposal to the board. So it's all a bit of a panic. But, you know, his divorce billions could potentially be about to transform our field, except we need to put a concept paper together for her. So far, so good. But as we're gathered, we need to basically work through the bare bones of what that would look like. How does that seem? We can do that, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Fine. So I think maybe it would be interesting just to hear from all of you. What do you think the hardest thing we're going to have to do today is as we design this scheme? Or is this going to be easy? Sarath, is this going to be easy?
Not really, because there is a specific definition of what UBI is. And today, I think, so we have to bring in those principles into it. And the central part of UBI is its unconditionality. It's unconditional. So it's not transactional. It's not contractual. It's complete. It's like unconditional love. So the other four elements are: it's universal, it's individual, it's only cash and not any vouchers and blah, blah, blah. And it is periodic. So if you give one-time grant, it's not BI, basic income.
Okay.
So now the challenge is, how do you now prepare a proposal for filmmakers who are not geographically somewhere, you know, ideally UBI is implemented by the state for all its citizens. Now, that's a challenge. Okay, I have some answers to your questions. So do others.
Anyone else worried about the challenges that may lay ahead? Jeb, what do you think the hardest thing we're going to have to do today is?
I think a global UBI will be a real challenge. So maybe we can think about regional ones, more appropriate in each region for the filmmakers. It's just a thought.
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard deciding who isn't eligible. It's going to be hard picking.
Yeah.
That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, no.
Any other?
I'm just as a note. I like the idea of universal basic income, but I also like the idea of guaranteed income, and during our research, we found also dignity income also appropriate for what we are thinking about.
Dignity income.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Because when you want to go into math, when you decide to do UBI, you have to decide from which point you are starting. And in general, we start with the poverty line. And for a UBI for filmmaker, it's not the poverty. We should not just be above the poverty line. It's the idea is to have a life, a good life, and exactly. And that's why we talked, and there is a lot of people also who is talking about dignity income.
Okay, I like that.
For the well-being of the filmmaker around the world.
Oh, hang on, guys, hang on. I'm just getting a text from Babs. Oh, good news. She can join us. She's actually on a psychic wellness retreat in Arizona, but I think she can spend a few minutes with us. Oh, look, here she is. Babs.
Hi. Thank you so much for jumping in on this. So Pepe is really new to Indie Doc, but it's already incredibly clear to him this documentary funding system is totally broken, inaccessible to most, unsustainable for those that do make it through, and pretty hostile to risk. But he wants to use his money and his tech smarts to shake things up. So here's what I know. We can offer you, or I think you should be brainstorming around a $30 million pot for this first pilot. Pepe is really open to the pilot either being local or global. It doesn't need to involve the US, but it can, and it should be designed to progress the documentary field. And those are his words, so whatever that means to you. And ultimately, he wants it to either prove or disprove that this is the best way to fund independent filmmakers. So that's what I've got for you right now. Gotta run. They're getting the giraffes ready. Bye.
Thanks, Babs.
Bye.
All right, so let's get into it. I think we should probably begin where we want to end up. If we're going to be using this pilot to prove that we found a better way of funding independent documentary, there's something we're going to need to be able to measure or have tracked, from the beginning to the end of this, so that we will have established that, whatever that is. So what are the things that we should be trying to prove or find? And I'm going to see what Jad, John, and Khushboo think about this, because they know the field. And then Sarath, I'm going to sort of see whether actually we're in the right space for things that are trackable or not, or whether our list of things is too long or too short. Jad, what do you think?
Actually, in the last few years, there was a lot of filmmakers that is changing their career because the career was not sustainable. So also in some region, for example, in our region, they're moving from the Arab region to Europe or to other places where they can live better. The number of people who will stay and will decide to continue their work in their own country region, I think is one of the greatest
okay, so staying in the field. Have the people that we've supported
staying in the field and staying in the region.
Okay, good. John, give me one, and then Khushboo, give me one, and then we'll keep going around and see if we've got a good list. Staying in the field.
The ability to make more films.
Yeah, are they making more films? Yeah. Khushboo?
So recently I actually spoke to a lot of filmmakers from India, because we had opened a call for applications. So I'm talking specifically from what I heard from them. For a lot of them, I think it would also be some amount of mental wellness, which I suppose is kind of related to what Jad was saying, but a reduction in the sort of misery or burnout that you feel just in trying to do impossible things.
Yeah, that's good. What else? Or are those our three things? What else would we be hoping?
I think it gets complicated because the documentary field is so large and encompasses so many different types of makers when we start having these really general conversations, because there's different protections that filmmakers who are working in a more investigative or journalistic way may need versus those who have sort of an individual fine art practice that intersects with the moving image, who are also vital and necessary to, creativity and free expression and independent voices. So, I mean, ultimately, we want there to be a presence of independent voices that are not being siphoned through other channels. And so to maintain that sort of state of independence amongst makers.
Is that a sophistication of staying in the field?
No, I think those are different things, because you can stay in the field and find yourself working, not honoring, your vision, your storytelling, your experiences, simply to make a living.
Or should we more tightly define what we mean by staying in the field, to be like able to make your own work independently, self-directed? That's let's tighten up that definition.
I think remaining independent also could be one of.
Yeah.
So that again, I didn't catch that.
To preserve the independence of the creator, the filmmaker. I think this also could be one.
That they're in the field and they're more independent than they have been, or they experience themselves as having more self-direction.
Yeah, and I think independent makers have a great need to be networked and to be within community, because even though you're working independently, you're still interdependent, and so you must find those community spaces. And from a New York perspective, what is really sort of shifting the landscape is the inability to find fair housing. So, I mean, it's separate from the basic income question, because I think on top of that, you need to have, affordable housing.
Yeah, it's not going to do everything. Can I throw in something around the makeup of the field we want to see? Because are we neutral about the kind of people who've stayed in the field and are very independent, or are we trying to change the makeup of the field? Are we trying to make the field more inclusive? Should that be one of our things that we can study and see whether will UBI enable us or help us to make the field more inclusive?
I think we have to be very frank and very direct. Not all the filmmakers are in needs, and some of them are coming from wealthy family, or they have their
hold that thought, because I think when we get to eligibility, we'll get onto this, like who do we want to put in this scheme. But in terms of like what the goals are, that when we get to the end of it and we say, this study has shown us that UBI funding independent documentary filmmakers makes more of them stay in the field, able to make more films more independently, and their mental wellness is better, and the field is more inclusive. That feels to me that would be.
Yes.
Do we have anything else we want to set as a goal? Or
like from an India perspective, we also need to expand the field. Like there aren't that many documentary filmmakers, so more people making films also, because here we don't even have any grants or any other support system. So I think that from where I am, I would think like more filmmakers emerging very clearly would also.
That's interesting. It might lead us to think that we want to, when we think about eligibility, preference people who are not yet in the field but should be, as opposed to necessarily just keeping people able to stay in the field.
Or over time, because you see that filmmakers are able to create work and sustain themselves, more people will be willing to do it.
Okay, I'm gonna put it over to our black belt now. Sarath, are we in the right territory for the goals that we should have from this pilot? And is that too many or too few?
Yeah, it's not too many, but I think we need to have a structure. First of all, I think is it going to be local or global depends on the universe that the filmmaker lives in. I mean, his audience, his platforms, and his producers, and his marketers, and the big multinationals which are there, whatever they are dealing with. Now, I think you can think, need not be global. You can think of depending on the structure of the industry, local communities linking, networking, and then having a global community.
I feel like
local community.
You're not jumping ahead to the question about whether we should be local or global. I was trying to get to the bottom of what we think we can prove with this pilot. Like when we spent all of Pepe's money, what can we hope in our wildest dreams to have proven? And are those the kinds of goal studies that you've seen, Sarath? How many things do they track, and how many goals do they have in terms of things that they will prove at the end of them?
Yeah, in this, I mean, the spirit of UBI is, I think, the whole community of care. Now, as I think Khushboo was mentioning about mental well-being of filmmakers, what that should be one. So you remove through care of the community, you remove those obstacles that come between their creation and their well-being and sanity. Okay. Now, if that is achieved at the end of this whole exercise, and what comes out is something it should be left to them. Whether they're going to produce a film or not produce a film, or just write a script or write 10 scripts. I mean, that is the very spirit of the unconditionality is the spirit. But I think every time we say no conditions at all, I think that's when the best also comes out. That's the reason I'm talking about this community of care. If that community of care is there, I think you don't care because you're as part of this UBI, you are supposed to care. It comes organically as part of the community. I think those are the elements that come out. And
I love your emphasis on unconditionality, and that's going to be interesting when we get to that part of the scheme, because whether Pepe will buy unconditionality or not, we don't yet know. But when you've been involved in these pilots before, unconditional or not, presumably they do track a number of outputs so that at the end of it, they'll say that the community was changed in this way or that way. Is mental health the number one thing that they track?
Yeah, mental health is one of them. Also, we track their economic activity, what is happening to the choices they make about economic activity.
Yeah.
We track the family relationships, what is happening within the family because of this. Has the domestic violence come down? Our relations much better. Women's status is one of the most important thing. And nutrition, particularly because we are dealing in the villages, so we track nutrition of the entire population, their food consumption patterns, their indebtedness, and then what happens to that. I mean, a whole lot of economic and questions. And also because we are in the development space, we also track many of the regular developmental outcomes of we give for about 18 months is a standard period we give. Sometimes 2 years, and sometimes also 12 years in Kenya. But these are the main indicators that you. But as filmmakers, I think what are those indicators is something that you can track. I mean, you have to have. You should make a documentary on that.
There's definitely going to be a documentary about this pilot. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Everyone's going to fight to be the producer.
Yeah.
So I think I feel confident. Our list seems like it's in the right area. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to the next big question. We've got 30 million for this study. I think the first thing we should probably figure out is how much of that money we're going to need to spend on administering the actual scheme, and that would include this evaluation, because it sounds like Sarath is saying that actually a lot of constant monitoring is very helpful, and it sounds like there's some qualitative as well as quantitative work being done to understand how it's changing the quality of people's experience, as well as some actual kind of markers. So what sort of percentage of this 30 million do we think is acceptable and will be acceptable both to the filmmaking community and to Pepe's Foundation when we say, listen, we're going to need this much of it to run it? So
there's actually a couple of questions that I had. One, how many years will this grant period be? Is this 30 million all coming in one lump sum? Or?
We can move that up and do that first if that makes more logical sense to people.
That would help.
Okay. How many John, how many years should we run this for?
Well, I mean, hopefully no more than 5. to pilot it. So I think 3 to 5 years is sort of the sweet spot.
Jad?
I thought also a minimum of 3 years, but maybe 5 or even 7 could be better to understand the impact of the model.
Khushboo?
I am still trying to comprehend what $30 million would look like, because it's a bit difficult to grasp what that would mean on a world scale, or because each unit of that money would mean different things in different parts. But I would feel maybe not very long, so maybe even 2 to 3 years, because then you can do it more intensely.
Yeah, also 7 years might be a long time to wait for these results if we want them to shape the field.
No, I'm not talking about the pilot, actually. Sorry, maybe I expressed myself wrong. I said for the pilot it could be for 2 or 3 years, but in general maybe a longer period could be more helpful to understand what is the impact of the UBI.
I feel like we're sort of coalescing around the idea of 3, but now we're going to ask our UBI. Let's ask our UBI expert, Sarath. What do we think? 3 years, is that enough for us to establish something?
I think the basis, what is the life cycle of any creation of a filmmaker? I think what is the average duration? I would say not less than 3, okay, and not more than 5. So somewhere it should be there, because you should allow the whole different stages of filmmaking to come out and to materialize. So that is one. You also asked the percentage, how much percentage for evaluation?
We'll do that in a second. So let's settle this. So that's an interesting question. I think, Sarath, you'll be shocked to know that all of us on this call know people who've spent more than 10 years making one film. That's not the average.
Released or not released?
Yeah. Some of our favorite films took that long, right, guys?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's interesting. We hadn't considered that, had we? What do we think? 3, 4 to get more of the.
Let's go in the middle with 4, because we're going to need a year to sort of develop and plan it. So.
All right, 4 it is. So let's go now to this question about how much we think we can set aside for the administration and the evaluation. What percentage feels right to take out of that pot for us to administer this over 4 years and to do the evaluation?
What feels right or what's necessary? I'd love all of this money to go directly to the filmmakers, but that's not the case. I think, a good rule of thumb is generally around 20%.
Okay, do I hear any difference of opinion?
I thought about 20% also, just to be realistic. It's 6 million actually, but since the monitoring will not end after 4 years, it should be more than 4 to understand well what was the impact of the project. So yeah, I think 20% is realistic.
Khushboo, what do you think about 20%?
Again, it sounds right, but and I think that the administrative costs might reduce as the pile, we understand what the effects of this pilot are. So at least in the beginning, it makes sense to have a good amount of money to understand the effects.
I think it sounds a bit high, but I want to know what Sarath thinks.
There are actually 3 components in this. one component is giving money to the filmmakers. Second component is the documentation and evaluation, because it is a pilot and it's a proof of concept you have to establish and say that this is a good model. So in order to do that, you need some expense of, documentation, and maybe make a documentary film or whatever.
Sociologists are very expensive, aren't you, Sarath?
Sorry?
Sociologists are very expensive.
Yeah, so not so. I mean, the third component and a very critical component in this entire pilot should be the community care. There should be activities of care and sense of community, in the spirit of community, and also some money is required to create the other communities with whom you are dealing with, and then bring them together. So the community work requires people to do it. If you calculate only these two of community work and the evaluation, the rest of the money you should give them. And I don't think, I think it should be not more than 10 to 12%. I think bulk of it should go to people, and that's where the transformation is going to take place.
Okay, what do we think, guys? Do you want to reassess?
Yeah, I really like the point about the community care aspect of it. What that seems like is also, again, in my own experience, the things that have helped me, sustain myself as a filmmaker is the ability to meet other filmmakers, and whatever has sort of facilitated that. Because it's otherwise such a solitary and difficult thing to do, that it can become really, really existentially horrific. So yeah, I mean, from that perspective, again, it's hard for me to comprehend just this sum of money, because I don't have any experience with it, but to definitely account for the community enabling aspect for it.
Yeah, I'm really grateful that Sarath has raised this as well, because actually I hadn't thought about it before this conversation, but every single thing that Doc Society has done has been predicated on the idea of community and networks being what will further the field. And actually, universal basic income, I think, as I'd understood it before hearing from Sarath, was a very individualistic thing, actually. It was very, yeah. And actually what he's telling us is, no, you have to reframe it actually as a community activity.
Yeah, it's given to an individual, but we expect from it community effects.
Yes. Of course, as do we, because we know this is the only way our field will prosper. So that's brilliant. So thank you for clarifying. So we need money for the administration, we need money for the community building, and we need money for the evaluation. But you still think that 20% is a bit high. Are we coming down 15%?
Well, here's another question. Are we staffing up from the ground, or is there a pre-existing entity that has the infrastructure to manage this? Because if we're talking, I don't know, 100, 300 filmmakers to pilot this with, who has the bandwidth and the capacity and the experience to manage that and to do the reporting that's necessary, wherever it's based?
I hear that. Let's settle the admin fee, though, because then we can move on to the number of filmmakers, and that will give us our average potential grant. So who wants to stick up? Actually, use the chat now. With all you've heard, put in your recommended overhead fee into the chat, and then we will take the average. Okay, I've got a 15 from Khushboo. All the others are thinking. I've got a 17. I've got a 17 from Jad and a smiley. So after sticking on 12. Look.
Because I wanted to stick also on 20, but I thought, okay, maybe I should go down.
Now look, Jess, BD, if you think along the way, if you think the money is not enough for evaluation, BD is not stopping you from going to another donor. So
Babs, we don't know that.
excited.
We haven't asked Babs yet because we don't know. Her funder may want this to be, entirely his own initiative.
Yeah,
I have known such funders. Okay, so we've got an average of 16. So that's what we'll go with. And now the question is how many filmmakers we want to put into this study. What we're thinking, and John, you already sort of said 200, 300. Is that your?
Oh, I mean, in a dream world, my grants manager jokes all the time when we get our budgets, and she's like, "Oh, that looks like a big number, but it's really not that much money." And we try to spread it thin, and that's difficult. So I think if we're going to pilot it in different regions, we should aim for a higher number. If we're going to go hyper local, we can sort of concentrate that number a little bit.
Okay, because these are sort of interrelated questions about whether we want to go regional or in clusters or totally global. This is something else to be decided. I wonder how these two questions interrelate. Should we? Do you want to try and settle that question first and then come back to the number of filmmakers? Or do you want to?
I think we're going to have to bounce between the two. Yeah.
Yeah, so it makes more sense to people. Okay, well, let's talk about that. So I guess our options would be, we could be hyper-local. I'm here in Margate in Kent. It could be a Margate Independent Documentary Filmmakers UBI study. We could do one city, we could do one nation, we could do totally global, and we could do clusters like 4 cities. What are people's inclinations? Jad, what do you think? I feel like you were talking about this at the beginning. You've had some thoughts.
Actually, we talked about it, and we thought that what could be really important for the industry in a country and in a region maybe is to go country by country. But also, I'm limiting my talk about the Arab world really because it is where I am and where I know better. It's not the same. It's not the same money that you could spend in Beirut or in Cairo or in Khartoum. So the best way to do it is to go locally by country.
But for this pilot, would you want to do the pilot in one country?
No, but no, this global pilot could not be in one country. It's impossible, actually. But if we have to think about maybe dividing it to more like local ones, maybe it could be more efficient as a study.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be a big pot, and then you have like locals, UBI in each country.
In each country. Now you want to be in every country in the world? No.
Yeah. No. But it's yeah.
John,
it's
yeah.
complicated.
John, what are your vibes? If we're going to prove something about independent documentary,
I think we need a critical mass wherever we are, and a critical mass in each country because of the specificity to each nation. So I would say no less than 10 filmmakers per country, or like if whichever country we choose. And if we were to think of the clusters regionally, like maybe like 4 regional clusters, but within that, a few different countries represented.
Khushboo, is this beginning to sound like something?
I was actually like intuitively, I feel like it should be one country or one place because it's a pilot. So you want to kind of try and first experiment with it, and I mean use it on a smaller, like maybe scale. Again, that how time sensitive is it, and if the main idea is to test its efficacy, I would think that rather than going extremely global or spreading it out too much, it's better to rein it in. But that's what I feel.
Would it be interesting to do
Can I suggest?
Yeah.
Can I suggest something? Maybe we can choose also 3 regions, 3 countries, different country, like one in South America, India, and one Arab world, and 2 or 3 African country, and do the UBI there. I mean, like 4 UBI by country.
Oh, that's interesting. Then it becomes a comparative study almost. You kind of go, if we did like Colombia, India, Egypt, and Kenya.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do we not want the US in there?
You know what? Yeah, I think it's really biased to exclude the US, especially considering the number of global filmmakers based in Brooklyn. And so you're actually eliminating most independent filmmakers by virtue of critical mass. And I think there could be other criteria within that in terms of if they're based, at somewhere like in New York or London.
I'm going to argue for the US. I think there's a crisis for US filmmakers to maintain their independence. I mean, John, you and I talked about this when I was in New York last. There's a crisis, with the cost of living squeeze and also like the closing of the independent space. And that crisis is going to hit the US, I think, pretty hard. I think countries in Europe that have strong state support for cinema, like France, will be less affected. So yeah, I'm going to argue for the US's inclusion. Khushboo, is the US in or out this study?
I would say no, but again, I mean, I don't know the filmmaking scene in the US, but from my perspective, like, the US has always had amazing films and filmmakers, and they've had a very healthy sort of industry with a lot of support. So only from that perspective, and again, because this is a pilot, and based on what Sarath has said, is also that you want it to be universal. So you want enough filmmakers from one region or whatever that geographical boundary is, only for that reason.
Sarath, you can hear the conversation. I think we're sort of coalesced a bit around the idea of taking 4 countries, maybe 5 if we include the US, or maybe 4 including the US. There's a debate about the US being around. What are your thoughts about the approach?
Jess, I think here I feel the key word is ecosystem. And there should be something organic about the cohort that you are thinking. It could be a country, it could be a region. I think, as Jad was saying, it could be that Egypt and a couple of other countries together make one ecosystem. So I think that should be the cohort you take, and no harm in taking more. So I mean, if India is one ecosystem with all the players there who make these things possible, I think that is one. And as John was saying, I think it's also important.
So, sorry, you're arguing for India in a completely unbiased fashion.
I mean, as an example, I'm saying if India is one ecosystem, it can be one cohort. Absolutely. So, I mean, US, I don't know why one can have a difference of opinion in that, because we are talking about independent filmmakers who are going to make films of very burning topics the mankind is facing. So I think anybody should be. We don't actually, in UBI, because it's universal, we are not interested in targeting. So targeting means it's very arbitrary, and there's no perfect way of selecting. You can't go by the merit. Merit is all subjective. You can't go by the deprivation.
We're going to come on to eligibility at the moment. Let's try and stick on what's our geographical decision? What are we proposing to Pepe's people we're going to do?
I think the country, ecosystem, or a group, a region, is organic, something very organic about it.
That's a
And
great
also,
note.
I think it's also useful from the point of view of community building. We are talking. It's also useful to have people meet occasionally face to face as human beings rather than globally virtually. So that opportunity we should not lose, because we are expecting a certain outcome, and that outcome depends on community building as well.
Okay, who wants to summarize where they think we are? John, where are we?
I think we're in regions, and I think to Sarath's point about being universal, even in terms of considering the Americas as a region, I think expands that a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's take a vote specifically on this question about the US, because Babs did raise it, saying that, you know, the US may be in or not be in. It's obviously something which will come up. I'm voting for the inclusion of the US. Anyone else voting for the inclusion of the US?
I'm voting for it to be included as either North America or the Americas, inclusive of Mexico, Canada, and the Caribbean.
Okay. Jad and Khushboo, hands down. I see that, which means that Sarath has. But I say Sarath has the deciding vote. He's with us. Okay, great.
No. I'm not against including the documentary filmmakers from the US, of course, but I'm just thinking, since it's a pilot, what will be the most efficient region where we can immediately help the sector? I mean, the sector everywhere is collapsing very fast. In the US also, I mean, we know it everywhere. All the ecosystems are collapsing. So we have to be really very careful about the choice of the region that we will be implementing, because some regions are more fragile than others. As you said, Jess, for example, Europe, especially France and Germany, they have a lot of public infrastructure. But if you go out from the north, you will find less and less public implication. So I'm not against to include the US at all, but I'm not sure that this is the most urgent for now.
Well, based on your criteria, Jad, I think the U.S. has to be included because there is no public infrastructure, and there's never been, and so I think that is a part of the fragility of it, and again, because we're talking about as much as there's regional specificity, we're living in a very global era, and so because of those like transmutable borders, a place like New York is an island unto itself, which ingests filmmakers in exile, filmmakers who are unable to make their work in their home countries. And so I think based on that, you know, and there not being public funding available like in a France or a Germany, like that's a great test pilot. And then it's you have a metric to put it against because of the level of visibility of the industry. You know, you're talking about people who are, and this is the other complication, and it'll come around criteria, because when I'm thinking of universal basic income, it's not just for emerging or new people entering the field. I know veteran filmmakers who've had 40-year careers who are unable to make their rent living in New York City, who are unable to make their next film. These are, you know, lauded filmmakers who have honed their skills and their craft and yet are unable to participate in the industry. I think that once we get to criteria is also something that has to be uplifted, because as we expand the field, you also have to model and demonstrate sustainability. You can't just ingest new people who will eventually have a fall off.
Yeah, 100%. Sarath.
Yeah, I think this pilot resources should go where it is most needed, and need not be the principle here, because at the end of the day, if we are our core concern is the flourishing of human spirit and human creativity. I think you should take one sample, one cohort where funding is oversaturated, and one cohort where there is no fund, there is deprivation of public funding or any kind of funding. Because even where it is oversaturated, it is possible that there is no community support, there is no community care, there is no opportunity for the kind of filmmaking some people would like to do, maybe in those spaces where it is oversaturated. I think there maybe some people are still finding it difficult. So you want to create a new culture of providing a care for filmmakers and remove obstacles. As we say, we have Lord Ganesha, who is the god of removing obstacles. So if that is your objective, I don't see any difference between most deprived and the most privileged.
Sarath, I'm so happy you mentioned Ganesh. Ganesh is the god we have upstairs in our place, and we are often asking Ganesh to remove obstacles for filmmakers. So, yeah. I mean, it's not for me to say that he might be the special helper of independent documentary. That's for others to say, but he'd definitely be in the running. Okay, I think that was a really great discussion. I'm not arguing for the UK to be in this talk, by the way. So now let's talk about the number of filmmakers, because that will give us a sense about the grants. I've got a little calculator ready here. Our grant pot began as 30 million. We've got 17% admin. So we've got 4,800,000 for running it, for the community building and for the evaluation. And that gives us a pot of money to go out to filmmakers of 25,200,000. We've set 4 years as the duration. So now we need to talk about the number of filmmakers. And as you make suggestions, I can let you know what that would make the average grant per year. Of course, there can be a discussion about whether money will be equally given or weighted to location, but it will give us a kind of a sense about where we are. So just so you know, if we put 100 filmmakers into that calculator, that would be an average grant of $63,000 a year for 4 years. You want a higher number?
What was the amount again?
If we did 100 filmmakers, given that we've already decided on 4 years and we've already decided on the 17% admin, that would be an average of $63,000 a year for each year. Because it's effectively
100 filmmakers. When we say 100 filmmakers, linking it back to the question of like the cohort, like how many cohorts are we doing to? Or
I think we got as far as saying it should be a global study. That doesn't mean global taking people from wherever, but because we need to build out from organically existing cohorts, and that will obviously take some thinking about where those are. There's been a strong push for India, and for the Americas. So we're thinking maybe 3 or 4.
So that would mean like if it's 4, then that's 25 filmmakers in each cohort.
Yeah, I mean, but you can try a high number. You can say, no, let's do 150 filmmakers. Like, tell me what numbers you'd like and what your thinking is, and like we can model and see what that would be. 63,000
per year for one filmmaker.
63,000 filmmaker. Yeah, $63,000 each filmmaker.
Is it a big amount for India, for example?
Yeah. It is.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, so I would think about it, Jad, like when you said the dignity income. So from that perspective, it's a big amount. Yeah.
Okay.
And from
because excuse me, because for New York, for example, it's the amount that people should have to live in dignity.
To live.
So yeah, exactly. So that's why maybe we can increase the number by having more people outside America, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's just the average. So it can obviously, if one person has 40, another can have 80. Yeah.
in Egypt, for example, you can give 50 people the amount of the 25, so, and it will be okay for them. And I think in India also it will be okay. So yeah, so Egypt and India will be 100, and then 25 in the United States, and it will depend on the fourth region or country.
Sarath, you wanted to comment on this?
Yeah, before we come to number, any number we will decide will be arbitrary. I think we should see why are we, I mean, we have a principle that I think in Europe there's a different discussion, but in Global South, the principle is that it should not be too low that it doesn't matter. It's not significant enough. It should not be too high to look like a windfall, or to create some kind of an artificiality of life, that it's there now, but after that it's going to go. It should, we say that it should be there's a threshold, and then you should, depends on what we are expecting. We are expecting that with this money they also use for production and blah blah blah, or they create something and then participate in the market and then try to raise money and make a film, all that. See, if that is the case, with one part of the money, you can also create some infrastructure that is useful for the entire cohort, a cooperative assets that they can actually capitalize on. So we don't talk about annual grants, we talk about monthly grants, so that they live on it. So if for each context, it has to be different. You have to go by the cost of living rather than a simple grant, because you have to see in that particular context, in that particular country, what actually matters, what actually is a decent, like you said, dignity, to live with dignity and not worry about doing odd jobs to make your living, you know. So I think that we have to create all that. So once you decide that amount, whether it is 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 per month, then you say, okay, then second aspect is the management. How many people can you manage? I think that's the point John made, that we should have the optimum size so that it is manageable, rather than we completely lose control over everything. So that is there. And if the community building is also there, you have to factor that into account about the size. An optimum size for a
That's why
community.
John stuck at 20% overhead. He's nodding sagely right now, being like, yeah.
So I think then you can decide how many. There's no golden number.
Okay.
100 grants is a lot to hold.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. But we could do more, given that
great.
Sounds like we're probably thinking that 3/4 of our grants would not be in the US. Just rough rubric. I'm not going to model that all out now on it. This is back of an envelope. All we need to do for the Two Fingers Foundation is a back of an envelope plan. So if we put 200 filmmakers into this metric, then that would average $31,000 a year. And given the weighting outside US, and also given what Sarath has just told us about, it mustn't appear like a windfall. Maybe we're closer. Maybe we can have 200 filmmakers in our cohort, which is a lot of people to work with if we're trying to community build. But it's a bigger number if we're trying to be statistically significant in each place, right, Sarath?
Yeah.
So what do you think about 200? 200?
Yeah.
200.
Yes. 200.
Yeah, you can have one cohort in the former Soviet also. That's one ecosystem. And one in Arab world. Yeah, so you can have more cohorts, more subsets.
It's interesting because we're having this conversation, especially for me, from a Western point of view. It's all very tied to capitalism. And so if we're trying to build new structures and our imagination is limited to the existing structures, which is, inadequate, we're sort of replicating a lot of those issues. And so even, for example, thinking of US filmmakers, and I hate to be, directive in how people live their life or like what they do, but it's also a question of like, are you willing to take this universal and basic income and not live in New York City? Because we want the dollars to provide, a dignity income, a livable quality of life, maybe that's a stipulation. It's like you have to move to Baltimore, you know, where now the average rent is a third of what it would be in New York. And so those dollars actually go further, but then you're resettling people. Essentially, you're doing a forced migration.
We're starting a commune, though, right? That's the whole plan here.
I mean, they're building them all over. So yeah, film communes.
John, you should leave it to them. You should leave it to their discretion. If somebody, or maybe 4 of them, if they are a community, 4 of them can come and share one place. Yeah, and co-work and coexist, and all that will happen if we have a community. I'm going on saying that.
Okay, we've got 2 more things to do. We've got perhaps 2 of the stickiest still to do, though. But let's just recap where we are. We've got our pot of money. We've got our 30 million. We're going to spend 4,800,000 on the overhead, and then we're going to put 200 filmmakers on a scheme, 4 years. They're going to be based in regional cohorts, and they'll come out as an average. Of course, it's a monthly scheme, but it'll come out as an average of $31,000 a year, and it will be weighted. Nobody objected to the idea of weighting the money to people's location, right? That was taken as given. Yeah. So that's where we are. But there's 2 things we have to fix still. One is the selection, is the eligibility. How are we going to find these filmmakers? And, you know, how much do we target or not target? It's an interesting question. And then the second thing we have to fix is what requirements there might be of people who are on the pilot. And we've heard from Sarath already, it has to be unconditional love. But whether that's realistic, given that we want this pilot to convince major funders to move on to this way of working, can there really be no requirements of the filmmakers who are on it? So let's do the first one first. Eligibility. Khushboo, how are we going to select these filmmakers? Who's eligible? Who's ineligible? Do people apply? Do we select them? How do we do it? Tricky.
I don't know. It might actually be like it may be like a lottery system where you pull people's names out, because just to randomize it a little bit and not over design it, because with the selection, again, you might inhibit its possibilities by trying to over engineer it. I don't know.
Yeah, I like that. So people would put their name forward, but then it could be a lottery. But could anyone put their judge? You like that idea of the lottery? But can anyone put themselves forward, or do we, in some ways, are we asking people to kind of like test themselves?
They should be making a film, or they should have made a film just to.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think they are the best people to know if they need this basic income or not. So maybe we should start by let them apply or not without deciding if they should or not. So first step maybe is to ask the filmmakers if they want to be part of this. I have a few concerns about the eligibility criteria, because also we don't. I think it will be unfair if wealthy people apply and got it. So I mean, it's not the idea. If you, Jess, or me can live in Beirut or in London, what we are doing already, and everything is okay, why we should take the opportunity from someone who could not afford what he is going through? So I don't know, maybe it should be like fine-tuned, just not to complicate it, but to make sure that this grant is going to the people that really need it.
But I like that we trust the community. We tell them who we're looking for, and then we trust them.
Of course, of course.
John, do you like this approach?
I'm 100% on board with trust-based philanthropy. So let's do it.
Sarath, what's the experience been from other schemes of how people have been selected, and do you think we're on the right track?
I think you have to define who a filmmaker is first. How do you know? How do you know somebody is a filmmaker? Somebody who wants to become a filmmaker, or somebody who has already made a film, already made films, or I think that has to be settled first. And once you settle that, I really like what Khushboo has proposed, that it should be self-selection. Once you identify based on your definition, because everybody is not a filmmaker, everybody is not a carpenter. So there are some carpenters, once you do that, you should put it out in public domain that, okay, this is an pilot we are doing, this is an experiment. If you think you're a filmmaker based on this criteria, this definition, self-select yourself, put your name in. So that should be non-exclusionary. I mean, it should be inclusive. And then you, depending on the amount you have, resources you have, you do a lottery and pick out who, depending on, or you have already settled the issue about the region and the place and all that. Once you do that, so I think that should be, because any eligibility apart from definition, see, in our case, when we say universal, you have to be human being and alive. Those are the only true criteria. Okay. So if you say eligible, you have to be, then I think then it becomes arbitrary. And then you have to have a kind of a bureaucratic control over whether that person continues to be adhering to that or not. It's like, government giving you, when you're separated, a single woman or single person, government gives you an allowance, but then it's monitoring you whether you're really single or not. That kind of thing. We should not be the inspectors or bureaucrats or monitors. I think it should be trust-based and transparent. I would say that should be a good, I think it will be an open and transparent thing. So nobody will have, I didn't get in. Oh, I'm not lucky. That's all. They will not say that this scheme is a scam.
Good. Well, that was much more straightforward than I thought it would be. I love it. Okay, so we have to settle the final thing, which is whether or not we're going to have any requirements of the filmmakers. And actually, I've just had a text message from Babs, who just remembered that she forgot to share something with us. I think I've sent her the link. Babs, are you there?
So I am so excited to hear how you're getting on, how this paper is shaping up. I did want to add one thing. Pepe's foundation people are really keen on getting the foundation logo out there. Just some acknowledgement of their support for the artists. So I'd just like you to bear that in mind with your pilot concept. Thanks, everyone. Can't wait for the paper. Monday is fine.
Thanks, Babs. Okay, so we have a funder who wants to get a certain amount of recognition for the pilot. How can we make that? What feels fair to us to ask of the filmmakers who are taking part in this, and how can we meet Pepe's needs, or not? Do we tell Pepe he can't have anything? John, what's fair for someone who's giving us $30 million?
I mean, it really depends, because it also depends on the filmmakers who are involved. I mean, there's some filmmakers who may not accept a forced branding situation, and so now are they excluded? I think once the decision is made to release the money to us, I mean, just as we're trusting the filmmakers, we need this funder to have a level of trust and, around their intentions. So per project, I don't know if it's fair to demand a logo, but I do think that some sort of other more subtle recognition is fair. And then, yeah, that's where I'm at. But I'm also considering the community aspect and like what contributions could be made into the community as a result of, having this universal basic income. Like
a wider set of beneficiaries than just the people who get selected by lottery. Yeah.
Right.
But in terms of the logo, I mean, let's take an example of a filmmaker based in Egypt for whom we've provided $25,000 for 4 years. So it's $100,000. Doesn't seem egregious to request a logo on the back of a film for $100,000, does it, Jad?
Actually, I don't think we should put the logo on the films, because we are supporting their livelihood.
We make them wear a baseball cap 24 hours a day.
Maybe we can ask for tattoos also. But maybe we can solve this problem by our internal communication. I mean, by the communication of the UBI itself, by saying that this UBI is funded by this foundation, but not.
We can get a lot of press. We can try and get a lot of press for it. Yeah.
But not to force or to ask the filmmakers to put the logo on their film. It's nonsense for me.
Just to play devil's advocate, though, if at the end of this pilot, we want to convince funders who've previously been funding projects and getting their logos on those films to switch to this model, might they not perceive this as a less favorable way for them to fund? For those that are shallow enough to care about their logo, like Pepe.
I think we should. We're talking now about an ecosystem and a whole industry, so it's not that important to. I don't think that also the funder now are that conscious about the communication of their logo, really, because I'm working with a lot of donors now, and 70 or 80% of them are more interested in the program that we are developing than in their logo. So it is also something that we can work with the donor towards it. But I really think that we should put some energy to convince them not to ask the filmmaker to put their logo, really.
Maybe you can also leave it to the discretion of the filmmaker. If they feel like it did significantly, enable them, then they can. And if not, and if they feel that this seems heavy-handed and unethical, then they should have the choice to not do that.
But UBI, as our friend explained, should be
unconditional.
Sorry? Unconditional. And if you ask them to put a logo, it is a condition, actually.
Yeah, it is. But Sarath is clearly a total utopian.
No. Okay. Let me. I think this foundation, which is giving money, is not to make films. They're supporting the filmmaker. That's number one. And number two, a filmmaker is a human being and living in a community, right? Now, I think Jad made a very good point earlier, that why are we thinking again in the capitalist market grammar? This is the market grammar. I give you money, put my logo there. I think it's the same grammar. I think we should just dump that grammar and move to the non-market grammar. Leave it to the human emotions. Let people express their gratitude in whatever way they feel like it. Let the community develop some kind of a code of how do we express our gratitude, because they love us. They love us. They gave us money because they love us, not our films. Okay, so we should. How do we reciprocate to that love? I think it should. I think it will emerge. Something will emerge. But at the same time, contractually speaking, neither should you specify, neither should you specify that our logo should be there, nor should you specify that our logo should not be there. Then you are making it conditional. So you should remove the conditions, leave the discretion to the filmmakers, and more importantly, the community, how they feel collectively about this. This is a wonderful opportunity that if I get like somebody looks after me for 3 years or 5 years, I do feel grateful to that person or that entity, whether it is God or foundation or my father. So I think let us leave it to them.
That was wise and beautifully put. I think I see nods all round. We're completely convinced and signed up to your new grammar, the grammar of love. Yeah, we'll leave the rest to Ganesh to sort out. Guys, we've nailed it. We've got we're at the end of our time, and we've done it. We've done it. We've got a model to put forward. I'm really happy with what we've done today. Thank you all so much for your time and your attention. And and see you at the launch party of the of the Two Fingers UBI independent documentary 30 million bonanza.
Slowly eating away from that admin cost.
So it would be the whole exercise will be transformative for BAPS as well. Yeah, good. That's fantastic. Lovely.
Well done, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Good job.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.